Patton paced around the old campsite, his thumb running up and down the smooth, polished wood of his bow as he glanced up at the blot of darkness on the mountainside. "Come on, Virgil," he muttered, reaching back to feel the feathers of his arrows. "What's taking you so long?" The others had returned from the curriculum's eyesore of a keep and moved on to the next strike point days ago, yet Virgil still hadn't emerged. He glowered at the large structure. If it wasn't for the fact that Virgil wouldn't hesitate to expel Patton from the keep in one of his magical defensive shield ball things, Patton would have dragged the ranger out by the ear 3.5 days ago. He huffed, again checking the string on his bow. The others had said that they had left no one alive within. They'd said Virgil was doing one last check and would be out shortly. Well, no check ever took 4 freaking days. Patton shook his head, exhaling. Shortly. Ha! He shouldn't be surprised. He shouldn't. But Virgil had to know he was waiting nearby. He would have signaled him with an emotor's flame if he needed help. Of course, the fool never ever considered that he might need help. No, Virgil would take on an entire legion without ever once calling for the others. Patton glared back up at the keep as he completed another circuit of the camp. Virgil had to have searched the place 100 times by now. Just because it had been one of the larger strongholds for the curriculum didn't mean that the ranger needed to check the towering monstrosity more than 4 times. 4 times had been good enough for all the other places they'd defeated. What could be keeping him? A snap of a branch from behind had Patton whirling, arrow already nocked and drawn, the tip gleaming in a sheen of sky-blue motes as he aimed it toward the sound. His bow lowered just quickly as a familiar starburst of purple flashed through the trees. Virgil! Finally. He stepped forward, dispelling the sheen from his arrow, slipping it back into his quiver as the ranger rippled into the view, carefully picking his way around the underbrush to their campsite. About time! Virgil made a face, shushing him with a sharp gesture as he approached. Patton tensed, bow at the ready as he glanced around. The area had been secured before the others left, but Virgil often sensed threats that the others couldn't. About time, he whispered, eyeing him with some concern, noting how the ranger had both hands hidden under his unusually bulky cloak. Patton clicked his tongue. What took you? And why was he carrying something when it looked small enough to sling over his back? What had Virgil found that warranted him foregoing his usual habit of keeping his hands free? Virgil stepped cautiously into the campsite, glancing around as he approached Patton. "The others?" he asked, ignoring his question. Patton rolled his eyes. What, did he expect them to wait for him? Gone, 4 days ago as planned. Hopefully Virgil caught that. 4 freaking days. "You're alone?" Patton frowned, fingering the string of his bow, testing its tautness. The ranger was giving off his caution motes again. Others would call it paranoia, but he'd known Virgil long enough to tell the difference. Of course. Virgil exhaled, tense shoulders relaxing as he adjusted the lump hidden from view. The caution motes swirled and shifted, brightening like the sun as he looked up. "Pat," he said, fighting a smile, his eyes the lightest shade of purple that Patton had ever seen. Those lilac-colored eyes were practically dancing, pulsing like a beacon of pure sunshine to Patton's sight. He couldn't help but smile himself, heart jumping in his chest at the happy motes spilling from the ranger. Virgil never emoted such strong positivity. What had happened within the keep to... "I found your hope." Patton blinked. Hope? That wasn't what he'd expect Virgil to say. He raised an eyebrow, slinging his bow over his back. "In the keep?" he asked skeptically. That sounded like an oxymoron. With the Curix? What hope could they have hiding in there? He cut off with a gasp as Virgil pulled back his cloak, revealing a young boy sleeping in his arms. A boy with dusty, rainbow-colored hair, faintly glowing under the sun. "A creativity," he breathed, his heart taking off like a hummingbird's wings. That was a creativity! He lurched forward, blinking rapidly as he grabbed Virgil's arm, his chest swelling with both his and Virgil's excitement. He'd told Virgil they still existed. He'd never stopped believing they were out there. To think that the Curix of all sects had one hidden. The boy shivered in the open air, his face scrunching up as he curled further into Virgil's chest, a faintly glowing stuffed rabbit held tightly in his arms. Virgil grinned without reserve, lightly brushing the boy's cheek, faint purple droplets coming to his fingertips, soothing the child back to sleep. "Once again, you've proven me wrong," he said, pulling the cloak so the boy's skeletal body was covered once more. Patton smirked. He did that quite often. Virgil shouldn't be surprised anymore. He reached out a hand, his heart skipping a beat as he brushed the boy's sunken cheek. This wasn't a dream illusion. The boy was actually here. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "A creativity? With the Curricks?" No wonder the child was so frail. With how rigid the curriculum's regime was, the boy could hardly have been expected to thrive. The ranger shook his head. "I know. I was as surprised as you are." "Verge, this—" Patton barely stopped himself from laughing out loud and waking the boy. "This could change every—" He cut off, eyes widening as his sky-blue motes unexpectedly rose to his fingertips, shifting to the pale pink shade that Patton often used when emoting love. They quickly flowed along the boy's face, bringing a sun-kissed glow to his pale cheeks. "How?" he whispered, watching his motes flit about. "No one should be able to emote his own emotions but him, not even another emoter, and this boy certainly wasn't one of his sect." Virgil shifted, moving to sit on a fallen log by the fire pit, cradling the young creativity in his arms. "I don't know," he admitted. I think he can sense our ideas and wants or create them, using his abilities or our own." His eyes darkened, emoting smoky gray frustration as Patton sat down next to him. "Mostly ours for now." The boy... A shudder ran through him, and he dropped his head, his emotions washing into midnight blue. "I nearly didn't find him in time, Pat," he whispered, clutching the child close. "I'd gone through so many boxes." Patton twitched, pulling his hands away from the boy as his own motes flared with Virgil's distress. "Boxes?" Virgil bared his teeth, a soft growl emanating from his throat as he hunched over the young creativity. Patton's heart stuttered in his chest. That wasn't a good sound from the ranger. Not good at all. He wrapped his arm around the ranger. "Virge?" he asked, giving him a comforting squeeze, fighting to not yet use his motes to soothe him. Virgil leaned into his touch, a vivid purple shield rippling to life around the three of them, hiding them from view. Patton bit his lip. Oh, it was definitely very, very, very bad if it triggered the ranger's defenses like this. He swallowed, bracing himself as he took a calming breath. "Verge?" He allowed his motes to surface, their blue color shifting to bright, vibrant red mixed with pink to encourage Virgil's confidence, to let him feel his love as he tried to soothe the storm he felt boiling within the ranger. "What did you find there?" The ranger licked his lips, refusing to look up. He shuddered. "I found a secret room just before we were to leave," he said, brushing the boy's cheek, a self-soothing gesture judging by the lack of droplets this time. "It was so covered in ivy I nearly decided it wasn't worth checking." Patton hummed, adding in soft yellow motes of understanding. "But you did." Virgil wouldn't have been able to rest easy if there was even a sliver of a chance that someone was hiding behind it. Virgil jerked his head in a nod, shoulders tensing. There was a staircase within, and at the bottom I found a room stacked to the brim with dusty boxes, shelves upon shelves of them piled high, just like the wine cellars back home. He frowned. Under the keep? That location didn't make sense. His motes swirled around him. But creativities need warmth. They need light. They need space. Virgil flicked his eyes to Patton, a hint of a smile on his lips. "So you told me 1,000 times. But I didn't expect to find one down there, remember?" True. Patton took Creativity's tiny hand as he quietly added in orange to the votes around Verge, to encourage him to continue his story, watching as more of his motes, these ones remaining his neutral blue, appeared like raindrops to play upon the boy's skin. "You thought they were extinct," he whispered, smiling beside himself as the boy sighed in his sleep, nuzzling against Virgil, squeezing the stuffed bunny in his arms. "I did," Virgil agreed, leaning into Patton as he cradled the boy protectively. Patton tilted his head, resting it against Virgil's. "And you found him down there?" Virgil shifted, his breath hitching. Not quite. I could sense I was needed in the room, but there was no one there." The protective shield flashed around them as Virgil's emotes went pitch black. "Until I looked in the first box," he whispered, rust-colored horror cascading through him and into Patton. Patton tensed, inhaling sharply as his eyes filled with tears, his body growing cold as he fought to block those particular motes from him. Oh, Crofters, please no, please no. Please just say that they were all empty. Please don't say this creativity was... Virgil reluctantly looked up, his eyes a purple so dark they barely reflected the sun as anger flared bright and hot to Patton's senses. The Curics were keeping all their creativities locked up in small boxes, Pat, he whispered, the purple shield pulsing around them. Every single box in that room had one, squeezed in so tight they could barely move, and Virgil inhaled shakily, the anger within flashing to deep sorrow in the blink of an eye as he brushed the boy's faded, multicolored hair. No. No! Patton shook his head, fighting against his emotor instincts as grief overwhelmed him. He was the only survivor. Hundreds of creativities within the curriculum's keep, and this boy was the only one to survive? He jerked backwards to prevent his emoting from falling onto the boy as tears streamed down Patton's cheeks in a tidal wave of shimmering blue motes. You're... He choked out, trying to breathe with lungs weighed down with lead. Virgil sighed, running his fingers through the boy's rainbow hair as he leaned into Patton, allowing his motes to encompass him. I'm sure. Patton's hand shot to his mouth, biting down hard on his knuckles to stop himself from wailing and waking the boy. All this time, the long-lost creativities had been held within this keep, and they hadn't... A warmed hand crept onto his. I know, Virgil whispered, his own cheeks streaked with tears. I know, Pat. Patton shook his head, dropping his hand from his mouth only when he was more confident in his speaking ability to cling to Virgil. It felt like a lifetime before he could pull his motes back, to calm his emotor's instinct. He inhaled shakily as he reached out, brushing the boy's hair from his eyes. This whole time, he croaked out. If Virgil hadn't found that door, if he hadn't felt the child's need, all creativity could very well have been lost to their world, just like... A chill ran down his spine, just like all logic had been lost when the curriculum first rose to power centuries ago. He shuddered, taking a breath. It wasn't something he wanted to think about. He didn't want to think about how they'd almost had history repeat itself, could still have history repeat itself. It was unbearable. He couldn't let it happen, not with creativity. You think he's the last? He asked, blinking the tears from his eyes. Virgil exhaled. Knowing the Curics, he very well could be. But Pat, he squeezed his hand, glancing at him. We could still lose him. He bit his lip, adjusting his cloak around the boy. He's so weak. I honestly thought he was dead until he freaked out when I touched him. Patton's motes flared, burning gold around him as he set his jaw. No. Death was not an option. He abruptly straightened. We're not going to let that happen. He looked up, meeting Virgil's eyes, glad to see the ranger's droplets flare in response to his own as he held out his hand over the boy. He'll survive. He'll thrive. We won't lose him. Not when he could very well be the last. Not when he could be the one to finally shift the war to their favor and overthrow the curriculum's stranglehold in their lives. His hand shimmered with blue motes. Deal? Virgil's eyes glinted as he laid his hand on top of Patton's. Deal, he agreed, his purple droplets mixing with Patton's to fall onto the young creativity, sealing their promise to him. Patton grinned, brushing away his tears as he leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to the boy's forehead. In this, they wouldn't fail.